Optimism isn't sunshine and rainbows. It's fixing things, changing the way we fix things. It's running the world on smarter energy. Because if optimism never stops, then change can't either. GE Vernova, the energy of change.
Oh, the sick day struggle is real. But with Dimetapp, it doesn't have to be. Children's Dimetapp works quickly to soothe multiple bothersome cough, cold, and allergy symptoms in a single dose. Our fast-acting formulas are designed with kids in mind, so they get everything they need and nothing they don't. Available in liquid and on-the-go chewable tablets. Tap the banner now to shop at Amazon and say goodbye to the sick day struggle with Dimetapp. Use as directed.
This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience.
War Eagle Auburn fans, welcome to Track Them Tigers, the podcast where you track down the biggest stories in Auburn football and talk about them. I'm your host, AJ Richardson, and we come to you with Mark Zoller, one of my buddies, pals. I used to work with him, and we're going to be talking about the Georgia game, all of the chaos, all of the mess, all of the good, the bad, the ugly, the refs, everything. We're going to be talking about it all and talking about this, those different storylines that came from this game, and there's lots of them. So, Mark, how are you doing? How's it been? It's been a little bit AJ. Since we've been on. I know we had you on, I think it was when we hired DJ Durkin to get your perspective on him, and here we are, 2025 season.
Yeah, hey, I'm doing great, and it's a pleasure to be on the podcast and talking some SEC football and some Auburn Tigers with the Auburn faithful. And so to your listeners, this is, I think, my third go-round riding shotgun on your podcast. So we did you're right, the last one was when you brought on DJ Durkin as the defensive coordinator, and before that we previewed the Music City Bowl with Maryland Auburn, which was, I guess a happier outcome for me, but it was an entertaining game, and it was nice to revisit, a rivalry I hope we get back to play some more games.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And especially, DJ Durkin hanging around an extra year for sure with Auburn, and maybe further down the road, who knows? There's always the cool connection with him and Maryland. But I wanted to start us out with, I feel like everybody can easily go to a lot of the negatives of this Georgia game where Auburn lost 20-10. The whole momentum of the game was in Auburn's hands the first half, flipped completely to the other half. Even, Greg McElroy, the commentator, he was like, I haven't seen that happen that drastically. He was like, I don't know if I think he's being serious, but he was like, ever. And it really felt like that for a lot of Auburn fans. But I do want to focus in on right now, even before we get into like the gameplay itself, I want to talk about the environment. And I don't know, Mark, if it came through the TV screen. I was watching it too, but I also had some family members there, and they all felt like this was about as good of an environment as you could have gotten for, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. What was kind of your impressions of just the overall environment of the game that led up to, the chaos of the 60 minutes of football, which ended up being like, I don't know, probably 4 hours of actual gameplay. It felt like.
No, you know what, AJ, I think you're right. I don't think you're biased at all. As an Auburn guy, I've had the opportunity to watch a game on the Plains, and so I have, it wasn't a Georgia game, so I think, this was up a level or two in terms of the excitement, but I think it had to be electric to be inside the stadium, and that was coming through on the broadcast, and for all the reasons that you say. I mean, oldest rivalry in the South. I think even though Auburn came in with a couple of losses, I still think everyone's feeling good about the product that they've got, the quality of athletes, and if they play their best football, what they're able to do. And so I think everyone went in there thinking there's no reason we can't win this football game.
Yeah, when Auburn, I think if you come into this game thinking, well, again, hypothetically, both the Oklahoma game and Texas A&M were both away games. Both of those teams are ranked in the top 10. I feel like if you turn it around at the Georgia game, you probably look back at the Texas A&M and Oklahoma game as, it was what it was. We kind of played them close, but hey, we turned it around at the Georgia game, and obviously that didn't happen. The first half we were definitely very hopeful, and I think some of that was just we have an offense and it looked very efficient. We were balanced, running, passing, doing what we wanted to, and on top of that, I don't know how, Mark, you paid too much attention to it, but they retired Cam Newton's jersey, and so there was extra different shows and extra stuff that they did on the field for Cam Newton to honor him. Pregame, and I even remember this was I'm gonna do like a little sidebar here because I thought it was really cool. So back when I was in college, I think it was maybe 2012 or maybe 2013, and Cam Newton came to, it was the Iron Bowl of basketball, and Auburn versus Alabama, and Auburn's basketball team was abysmal that year. It was under Tony Barbee, and Cam Newton came to just be in the student section because I think he came back to finish up his degree, and he was on campus watching the game just like any other student. He grabs like one of the cheerleader microphones, the big megaphone thing, and he starts getting the students all riled up. And from that point on, Auburn basketball took over. And what's cool is in this game, he took that same, like a similar megaphone, went into the student section, got the fans all, hyped up. And I feel like that was like the first half. Everybody was so excited up until the last couple minutes when obviously things turned around with the fumble or not touchdown or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I feel like that was really neat. Mark, do you have anything else to kind of share about Cam Newton or what you kind of remember from him, even from like an outside perspective?
Oh, I mean, just what a magnetic person he is. Not obviously the skill set was unique at the time. Like you could think of him as being one of the people that sort of was the forerunner of what is the modern prototype of quarterback play.
Like a Patrick
the real
Mahomes
dual threat
or
guy. I mean, he was the dual threat guy. He was one of the original ones, right?
Yeah.
And I remember watching him not just at Auburn, but his prime in the NFL before the injuries started to really take a toll on him. And he was a weapon. Like there was no answer for him. And yeah. I think just having him in the stadium, sort of when you can relate to that as an Auburn fan, and because obviously plenty of people there remember when he was there. Yeah. And I think it fed into that energy. And while these other guys weren't down on the field, it's worth noting Charles Barkley was in the house.
Oh yeah.
As was Frank Thomas. So, this was a big night for the Auburn faithful. And so, certainly disappointing in the end result, but all the ingredients that were there for it to at least be, a first half of football like we saw.
Yeah, and that first half was amazing. And it even, the players, Hugh was asked about, like, even heading into half, how did you feel? And I legitimately think everybody was feeling great. The fans were feeling still pretty good. They're probably, angry about how it ended because there was essentially a 10-point swing, hypothetically, right? Auburn scores 7, you go up 17 zip, or, what ended up happening, rolled a fumble, then Georgia drives down the field, they score a field goal. And, that's obviously kind of the way it went. And while I think everybody is pretty, except for Georgia fans, pretty on board with that was not a fumble, that the ball went across the goal line. All it has to do is, the tip of the ball has to go across the front of the goal line. Pretty simple. But I think the hard part was it was a fumble. And there was lots of shadows. There were lots of players kind of blocking things. So you never really got 100% clear shot, even though you can pair up, different angles. And they spent I don't know, it felt like 15 minutes, maybe I'm exaggerating, but it felt like 15 minutes looking at that play just to make sure, is there anything for sure? And that's the unfortunate thing. I still think it's a touchdown, but they couldn't video, for sure show that. And that still makes me mad. I even heard Hugh Freeze, who's a pretty, level-headed guy used the word, "I'm pissed off about that." And you're like, that kind of shows you the level that he came into half with, just being mad.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I think it makes sense that we start here, in fact, talking about the game, because there's a lot to cover about the game, but
Yeah,
at the end of the day, this is the watershed moment in the football game.
yeah,
And so, first of all, as someone who's technically a neutral party here, watching it on TV, it looked like a touchdown to me.
yeah.
And and then we looked at it 25 times collectively, and it's hard to understand a little bit that they ruled it a fumble on the field.
Yeah,
Because if they had ruled it a touchdown, it would have been in the same situation. There was no way to
yep,
overturn it based on what you
exactly.
saw. It was too
Yeah,
close, and it is hard to believe that the nose of the football didn't break the the plane of glass on the plane of the
yeah,
goal line.
yeah.
And so, yeah, technically it's the 10-point swing, but I think emotionally it was like a 100-point swing. And
Oh, it was nuts. Like, it just kind of reminded us as Auburn fans, which we have recently gotten the shaft on a lot of these calls. Like, I don't know if you followed it, Mark, but the Oklahoma play where
yeah,
they did an illegal play and it should have been a personal foul. Pulled them back 15 yards because they did something illegal by putting out a essentially fake running off a player, and then he's wide open, which is illegal in college football. We already are a little scarred by that, and then you get that plus the another weird one with the whatever timeout or clapping that you want to say.
oh, that was ridiculous.
Yeah. So you have both of those, and those are the bigger ones. There's other ones like, was it targeting? Was it not targeting? On both sides of things. And yeah, I mean, the refs had their issues for sure. But at the same time, I'm going to turn this around and be like, yes, refs are going to miss calls. Refs are going to mess up. And even with video review, while it does correct a lot, it's still not going to correct everything. And you have to come in with like the mental fortitude and strength to bounce back. And that was honestly the most disappointing part about that, was Auburn was not turning that momentum that wasn't there. They were not trying to like truly get back the momentum. And that to me was just kind of, disheartening.
Yeah, I think almost as tough as having that call go against you, the fact that it's almost as damaging that Georgia was able to get down the field and score before halftime.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you completely dominate a half of football the way that Auburn did, and you only have a 7-point lead at half, I mean, the momentum has swung as you walk into the locker room, and then you're trying to recover from that adversity. And one thing I'll say that and I think why it just felt ominous for Auburn at that point is, one thing I'll note about the Kirby Smart era at Georgia, these guys do not panic.
No.
And they just hold on. As long as there's time on the clock, they just continue to play, and they don't do anything crazy, and they just stay mentally and physically present until the pendulum starts swinging the other way. Like, you look, was it last season was it last season when they were just getting shellacked by Bama, and they did ultimately lose the game, but they came back from like 24 down or something like that.
Yeah, it was not. Yeah.
And so I think that there's, that's pretty instructive to other programs, that if you have, top flight players and you prepare them and you put them in a position during the game to be successful, and you just, sort of stay the course when the crazy things happen, then you always have a chance. And I think that they play with that kind of maturity, and they just sort of weather it. They don't, even when they go through stretches where they seem to, during a game, maybe play poorly, they sort of assume that they're going to get it together. And a lot of the times they do, and they did.
Yeah. Well, and Georgia has a track record of doing that. So, the coaches and players kind of believe that. The hard part, I feel like, for Auburn is we haven't done that. There's only been maybe a handful of games under Hugh Freeze that I can think of where we're down and then we make any kind of comeback. And, it in my mind, it's one of the big kind of overarching thoughts in my mind is belief and trust that you can do that. And really good teams are going to be able to do that. Even just plain good teams are going to be mentally tough for those full 60 minutes, regardless of what happens in the first half. They're going to play the full 60 minutes. And so far, I haven't seen that out of Auburn, which is pretty, again, disheartening to see, because you would think, Hugh Freeze's third year in, and, has his guys in, has his coaches in that he wants. And, the offense is still not doing well. It's not adjusting in the second half how it needs to. And, one other thing that, Georgia does really well is adjusting from first half to second half. I mean, they've typically been a second half team in general already this season. And, they outscored Auburn, essentially 20 straight points from the last couple minutes of the first half through the end of the game. And that's because, again, they're putting in the effort, like you said, and putting down their heads.
Well, I think the frustrating thing for the Auburn fans is, to your point, that the offense has still maybe struggled to even find its identity, but to perform at the level that you're expecting when you bring in Hugh Freeze. And so you look at the first half, and you can't ask for a better defensive effort than you got. And then I would still argue Georgia made adjustments, and, they talked on the broadcast a little bit about this was like the sixth time that Mike Bobo and DJ Durkin had faced each other, and they talked a little bit about that cat and mouse. But even at 20 points, Auburn's defense played well enough for you to win that game.
I mean, they kept Georgia under 300 yards. Here's another interesting stat, which I think is pretty telling, because Georgia can run the ball if they really want to. Auburn held them to 79 yards and 2.5 yards per rush, which on paper, that is about as good as you can do against a really good, physical team like a Georgia. And yet, I think, I forget the exact time of possession, but it was very heavily shifted in Georgia's direction. I think Auburn maybe had the ball for 6 or 8 minutes in the whole second half. Everything else was Georgia. And it's gonna wear on you as a defense.
Yeah, I mean, it finished out at Georgia 30 minutes 12 seconds, Auburn 29 minutes 48 seconds.
Yeah, but then Auburn in the first half, it was like the complete opposite. Auburn was holding the ball and just they controlled everything pretty much.
And then, when you look at the other side, I think the other part that's frustrating, like Georgia, because of, I think, the factors we're talking about, is still managing to win games. But that's, to me, not the Georgia defense I've been watching for the last, several years. And they were very much like bend and don't break. I mean, I think if your offense or anyone's offense were clicking on all cylinders, that was a defense you could hang some points on.
Yeah.
And so I think there were a lot of, lost opportunities when you look at, Auburn finishes with 137 passing yards, no passing touchdowns, and 4.1 yards per play, 140, 277 total yards. And you held Georgia to 291, but I think they were gettable right now from a defensive perspective. And they're kind of just sort of keeping the big plays in front of them, which is, fine to do, but you got to go down there and 8 or 10 plays and stuff it in.
Right. Well, and here's another aspect of that. I mean, you talk about how Georgia kind of approached things, and Auburn had their chances, especially like the little dink and dunk kind of, like, if we wanted to do that, we could have. And what was kind of interesting, the second half, Auburn's offense had times where we could get drives going with simple passes, or I think for sure the Eric Singleton long pass, it was right down the middle. He was wide open, had multiple steps on his defender. If he catches that, it's like we score a touchdown, or at worst, we're getting a 40-yard pass, Yep. And so that's one play. Another play was a little short dinky pass to our tight end, and it was over the 6'6" tight end's hands. And you're like, how did that happen? Like, that's on the quarterback to pass it to him, and just not putting yourself in a place to continue the drives. And again, I don't know where I keep coming back to the mental fortitude of like the players, but on offense it seemed like that was not there second half. Like they were not sharp. I think even Hugh Freeze, he tracks he calls them MAs or missed assignments, and I think Auburn had a relatively low. I think he said somewhere in the 20s missed assignments. So essentially like the player didn't do what they were supposed to. And in one drive, Auburn had 11, and it's like that is crazy that you would have 11 guys essentially not doing their job throughout that whole drive. And that to me is like probably much a lot on coaching. I mean, it's probably some on the players, but a lot on coaching, and to have your guys just not doing what you're telling them to.
Yeah, it's coaching, and when you look at the bigger umbrella for that is it's what's the culture you're putting in place there, and because it's coaching at first, but when guys have been in the program for a year and 2 years, and maybe some of them going into 3, then it's just the way that you play because this is how we roll here.
Yeah.
So for example, I'll tell you so Mike Loxley, the coach, at my school, Maryland, was with Alabama as the OC, but he had been with us multiple times and he was a local guy. So it was like bringing a local guy home. But when they did that, the reason people felt optimistic that maybe he would really be successful is, he spent time, with the trust the process regime there in Tuscaloosa. Well, for all the good things that maybe Mike learned from Saban and being on the staff, the Maryland has still racked up quite a lot of penalties, sort of year in and year out. It's still been, they haven't played with the kind of discipline that you talk about when you talk about trust the process. So that's not so much about, hey, what did I learn schematically or even philosophically? It's, am I preaching the culture and am I getting the guys to buy into it? So maybe that's what's going on with Auburn, because when you look at, when you guys hired Hugh Freeze, it was like, all right, well, this is the perfect solution to get them back to where they think. And we all remember the kind of success he had at Ole Miss.
Oh yeah.
And you would argue that, and I would still argue, you have a better base to operate from than you do in Oxford. To
100%.
to do it in Auburn. And so you have to ask the question, like, why isn't it happening? And it's not just misassignments. Like, I know that some of these are arguable, and we probably will talk about some, but Auburn had 11 penalties for 103 yards.
Oh my gosh, yes. That irks me. And guess what? I don't know if you've watched the last couple games. That has been also a consistent theme. And again, to me, all of those, well, maybe not all, but most of those are coachable. It's don't do it. Just know the rules of the game and just don't do it.
They're drive killers. They're absolute drive killers, and that's what kills momentum. So there's plenty of things to look at within the coaching staff, not just with the players.
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of want to bring things back around. I mean, I feel like everybody wants to put blame somewhere, right? Especially in these type of games. I think you could easily put blame on the refs. Okay, fine, if you want to put it there. But I don't think that's ultimately it. I mean, if Auburn, wipes it off truly at halftime, forgets about what happened with the fumble at the end zone, and comes back out and plays their game and actually has even somewhat of a halfway decent offense second half, you might be in this game. Like, I think there's a fair chance that you are tied with Georgia going in the last few minutes, or it's literally a one-score game. Whereas, how it ended up being was, Georgia the 2 scores away and this game's pretty much over, kind of mindset. So where are you kind of putting if you were going to put your blame on where this game kind of went wrong for Auburn?
I'd say in the second half. So first of all, Georgia they're a hard team to beat. I mean, in the last 5 years, how many games have they lost total?
It's probably, I don't know, like 1 or 2 a year.
It's a small number, right? Yeah. So regardless of the success you have in half of a football game, and for the reasons we've talked about, the ability of that staff to make adjustments and come out, you had to assume, even without the momentum shift on the fumble or the touchdown that was called a fumble.
Yeah.
Even without that happening, you have to expect that UGA is going to come out and play some more inspired football and address the critical errors that they saw, and that it's going to be a football game in the second half. And I think, when you've so thoroughly dominated the first half of football, you've got to try and sustain some drives, even if it's not sexy, and I think that's where it's one thing to all of a sudden you see that UGA can move the ball and they've figured some things out into, from a play calling perspective, but you have to figure out how to get off the field as a defense. And I think in the case of Auburn, as I was watching it, how to stay on the field and keep drives going. And so, it seemed like Arnold I don't know if it was him trying to force stuff or it wasn't necessarily the right play call for, the defensive call that Georgia made at any particular time. But, football players will talk a lot about oftentimes a football game comes down to like 6 or 8 critical plays. And it's easy to look at the things like the fumble and like a targeting call or something like that. But as I'm watching in the second half, there's, 3 or 4 times where Auburn just needs to pick up a first down and keep driving.
Yep.
And if they even get down the field and like quell some of the momentum, kick a field goal at least, and keep this game close, then you're just in a 1-score game, and then it's just a matter of trying to play it out. So I really think you started to feel like as you're watching the game that, hey, maybe Auburn's not going to be able to get first downs. And that became kind of the way it felt in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the second half, I think it was only 3 first downs. Yeah, pretty much 3 first downs after the first half. Like that, you're not winning many football games with that kind of. And some of those, 2 of those were actually in the garbage time where, probably Georgia's playing prevent, right? So, take it with a grain of salt that Auburn has actually had a few first downs. Like it legitimately only 1 first down in the whole second half. And to me, that needs to be adjusted, whether that's the player's effort or it's play calling. Something has to change if you're going to win football games in the second half. Because guess what? Games are won and lost a lot of times in the second half if they're close.
And I think sometimes that's the challenge with some of the more high-powered, sort of potent offensive coaches and, guys who really make a living off of scheme and putting a million points on the board. Sometimes you get into these games and the feel of it, changes exactly like this game, and it flip-flops and everybody starts tightening up, and then you need to be able to grind it out a little bit. And when I think of the best Auburn teams, like historically, they're very balanced, and they probably, and I would say they're more of a running team, and then they throw off of a really good running attack.
Oh yeah.
And
guess what? First half, we had a good running attack, which, again, shows we had 200 plus yards of offense in the first half because we had a good running game, and then we could throw off of it, right?
Yeah, and that's what and as I'm watching it in the second half, I'm like, you just need to feed them that ball and keep churning it out and win in the trenches, because you were winning in the first half instead of Arnold feeling like, oh, I've got to make plays, for us to win this game, because he's not at his best when he does that.
No, and in this first half, he kind of, you saw it was almost a little loosey-goosey, free looking, like he was just vibing with the crowd. He was playing well, connecting with his receivers in the ways that he needed to. And then it literally felt like a flip of the switch. Something he was turned on in the first half where he was clicking on all cylinders, and then something just turned off in him in the second half. And he's throwing balls at people's feet, throwing them way over their heads. It just felt weird. And again, maybe some of that blame should go on Jackson Arnold, and I think that's probably rightly so. Because I think if he plays, even average quarterback play in the SEC, he keeps Auburn in this game. He at least starts some drives. And who knows, once you get your first down of a drive, that leads to a second one, and you drive down the field. You just don't know. I kind of want to round this out with something, and this is something I think is pretty timely, because I'm starting to hear some rumors about this. I personally don't think Hugh Freeze is going to get fired mid-season, But if things go south and he does not show up and his team does not show up well for the next, say, 2-3 games, I could see Auburn making a decision to, part ways with him mid-season. I think his buyout right now is around $15 million, and Auburn pocket change. We've had some much higher buyouts of coaches. Not to mention, other ones like James Franklin at Penn State was like, what was it, $50 million that his buyout was?
$49 million to check out of Happy Valley.
Yeah. And who would have thought, somebody who beat Auburn twice just a couple of years ago would get fired before Hugh Freeze does. That's pretty crazy. But the point is, I think, there is a chance of that, even though it is very likely low. And one thing that I'm hearing, especially with DJ Durkin, Maryland head coach for a while, and has that experience, is probably gunning at some point to like come back into the head coaching ranks. This could be an opportunity, at least as an interim head coach. And then if he does really well, you might set yourself up for I'm coming in as the 2026 head football coach. Again, these are all hypotheticals, but any kind of initial thoughts on what might be happening if things start going south for Auburn?
Yeah, well, I have to think, as knowing a little bit about DJ when he was at Maryland, I have to think that he naturally welcomed the opportunity. I think that he would be an obvious choice to have the interim tag if something were to happen this year. I think the thing that's attractive about him from that perspective is, he's just an effort guy. I mean, and he used to talk about that when he first came to Maryland, and they would talk about sometimes you're playing. So like as we moved into the Big Ten, you're playing up against some of more elite competition in terms of talent, and he said, you can always out effort people. And he would talk about that a lot. And that's what he preaches. When you watch him, you can tell that that's kind of what he's all about. And while given the things that happened under his tenure and, there was a lot of controversy there at the end, one thing I'll say is he seemed to have quite a lot of support inside the program and, with the players. And he was a guy that people wanted to play for. And so if Auburn's in a situation where they make a decision about Freeze, that's probably the kind of feeling that you want to have, at least at a minimum, going through the rest of the year. The Auburn community and booster community would have to sort of weigh in on the pluses or minuses of kind of maybe, some of the baggage that DJ might carry, even though that's, we're kind of many years removed from that now. But I mean, for Durkin, from that perspective, if he is successful, even if it didn't result in an opportunity on a permanent basis with Auburn, it maybe moves him a step closer to having another shot at being a head coach. And so, again, there's some things that people have to weigh, any institution that kind of wants to do that. But if you just look on the basis of, talent as a football coach, record in the positions that he's had, and just the X's and O's, then he's a guy just on that basis that should get some consideration.
What if an appliance emergency didn't have to be? If your appliances suddenly decided they were done, don't stress. Best Buy has you covered with a wide variety of major appliances from trusted brands, in stock and available now. So you don't have to worry about laundry piling up, refilling the fridge, or that big dinner party you're hosting. Because Best Buy has the knowledge and expertise to get you the right appliance for your home. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
Introducing Meta Ray-Ban Display, the world's most advanced AI glasses. With a full color display built into the lens of the glasses, it's there when you need it and gone when you don't. Send and receive messages, translate or caption live conversations, collaborate with Meta AI, and more. Be one of the first to try Meta Ray-Ban Display. Visit meta.com/Meta Ray-Ban Display to book a demo and find your pair.
Yeah, and there's plenty of players that absolutely love him. I mean, you see the defense, they're playing their guts out, even though they're on the field for the whole second half pretty much. And that is DJ Durkin. I mean, if he asked his guys to be on the field for 45 minutes of a game, they'd play their hearts out for him for 45 minutes on defense if that's what it required of them. And they, they're going to fight and claw because DJ Durkin is that kind of guy. He's going to be essentially kind of, think of him as the general in the trenches kind of guy. I mean, he's right in there trying to work for his guys, set them up in a really good position to win. And I've definitely become a really big fan of him. I don't know also if you saw, but in the offseason, people were gunning for to get DJ Durkin away from Auburn. And apparently there was some like significant money either as coordinator positions or maybe even some head coaching positions thrown at him. And so Auburn had to counter that with a pretty significant raise to keep him at Auburn. And DJ took that and stayed at Auburn. So I think he likes what he's seeing and what he's kind of building over the last couple of years at Auburn. And, again, all hypotheticals there, but I think, he would be a good fit if we had to go to an interim and then kind of evaluate, kind of how he approaches things as a head coach. But I think he's already got some of that experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good sign that he stayed. I mean, I know that when he came to Auburn, Lane Kiffin said, no, I mean, I wanted to keep him, but I couldn't afford it. Mm-hmm. And so, I guess I'm not surprised by that. And I think that, one thing you can say, especially in the SEC, if you're able to play defense at a consistently high level week in and week out, you're going to be in a lot of football games. Yeah. And that will solve a lot of problems for you. So at a minimum, if somebody makes a change, hopefully, Auburn can keep him in place. And I agree with you. It would be interesting. And, as someone who knows the complete history, both before he came to Maryland because we hired him, but then, all the things that happened while he was there, I have thought about, as he's been on this nice run of DC roles, between Ole Miss and Auburn, was he in a position to get himself back into a head coaching job? And so it would be interesting to see how that plays out for sure.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think he's set himself up well if he wants to kind of stay in that defensive coordinator kind of, role. I mean, I've seen that with some coaches. They just love the coordinator side of things. But if I'm being honest, you can kind of see I feel like he's wanting to get back to the head coaching ranks now that kind of a lot of the situation for Maryland is kind of passed and, things have kind of cooled down with that. So,
and he's probably matured as a coach. He was, pretty young guy as a head coach when he got there. And so, there's no bigger stage than the SEC for college football. And so I'm sure that has paid dividends for him. And, it's funny or interesting that you mentioned this because I don't know why it's stuck in my head, but I kind of noticed, and during the broadcast, I don't remember, was it halftime, when Hugh Freeze was, responding in the interview just before he went in the tunnel.
Yeah, it was right before half. Yeah.
He said something like, you're playing for your life every week, and you're playing for your job every week in this league. So
it probably feels that way.
Yeah, and I think the kind of heat he must be feeling because even though he seemed, he was a big get, I think, and if Auburn hadn't given him an opportunity to come back to the big stage, somebody else was going to because he did such a tremendous job at Liberty, and everybody knew what a great coach he was. All that said, now in the modern climate with NIL and you have to put together a new roster every year, there's never been a bigger premium on win now. Like the old, we hire a coach and it's a minimum of 3 years to see results. And, we give them these contracts. We started giving them these guaranteed contracts for 5 years because the conventional wisdom is I have to build a program and get all these players in the pipeline. Well, that's kind of out the window now because the players can come and go and, the stakes for everybody are higher. The players make all this money. The coaches make more money than ever. And so there's just not as much leash to struggle. Yeah. And I'm sure that Freeze is feeling that now.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, he had already kind of set his own expectations of this year that playoffs were kind of the goal. And when you already start the season 3-3, would have to win out. And even then you might be on kind of that bubble of should we consider you in the playoffs at a 9-3 team, when there's probably likely tons of 10-2 teams and 11-1 teams, maybe an undefeated team kind of thrown in there, that would be kind of tough, right? But, that's what he set for his expectations for this team. And, it's tough. Like when already halfway through the season, you're like, yeah, likely that's not going to happen. And,
Well, I think that as an outsider to like Auburn and Bama and the rivalry and all of that, for a long, even while people hate it to have to say it, for a long time you could say, look, they've got, the most successful college football coach in history down the road in Tuscaloosa.
Right.
And as long as Saban was camped out there, to some degree, everyone else, and not just Auburn, but everyone else was willing to accept maybe we're not going to quite, get to where we want to go as long as Alabama's in our way. Yeah, somebody would pick them off. LSU beat them here and there, or
an Ole Miss or something.
Yeah, somebody will pick them off, but that's different than knocking them off.
Yeah.
But now that he's gone, it really changes the calculus, and I think there's not nearly as much patience for, hey, it's going to take a little bit of time to get it together.
Yeah. And I'll also say this. I mean, Kirby's a fantastic coach, knows his stuff. And part of it is I don't think Georgia is nearly as good as they have been in years previous. They're a good team, but are they as good as they used to be? No, not even. And, again, opens up the door and puts the calculus of, well, Auburn had a legit chance of beating Georgia this year. It's at home. Again, kind of puts that, calculation in your head of what does this do? Like, what does this do to the team's morale? What does this mean? I feel like the fans' morale has been completely deflated. That's not a good place to be.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say that the SEC as a conference hasn't really looked this wide open well, it hasn't in a long time. So, we talk about Bama, now they're playing well again, but obviously the loss at FSU was pretty shocking. And then all the Bama people I know were being unusually quiet and trying to decide whether or not they had to readjust their expectations again. And they were starting to maybe lose a little bit of patience as well. Then you see LSU, who still has arguably the best overall talent, as anywhere in the country. And they bring in, what's his name? Brian
Kelly.
Brian Kelly from Notre Dame. And the whole idea was, okay, now we're going to win those, 2 or 3 games a year that really matter. And he hasn't done that. Like, they've started slow and then they play great, for the rest of the year, but it doesn't really quite happen. And to your point, I think Georgia is still in the mix and will continue to be. But when I watched them last night, I'm like, the way that Auburn played defense in the first half, that's the way I was accustomed to watching Georgia play defense. And they're not doing that either. So, then Tennessee, they sort of tease you into thinking they're stepping up to that level. And then it looks like it's not really going to happen. And so it's sort of like it's out there for the taking. And I know Auburn, wants to take it. And hiring Hugh Freeze was a big statement in that direction. And look, I'm not saying he can't do it, but he's certainly behind schedule from the Auburn community's point of view.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. One other thing you had said, like, it feels like the SEC is about as wide open as it can be. And I was thinking, I feel like there's a lot of SEC teams that are ranked. And sure enough, this last AP poll that just came out this week, there's 10 SEC teams on it, which shows you 10 of the 16 teams are ranked. That shows you how much competition has stepped up in the SEC. But again, it's kind of wide, in some ways, a lot of wide open for those 10 teams. If you can prove it, you have a legit chance of winning the SEC or just playing really well in the SEC. But you got to do it. And again, it's tough because there's over half your teams are ranked.
And you can't, you can't sleep on Vandy anymore, and you can't sleep on Missouri. You've got to show up, and I know that's next up, right?
Yeah, Missouri's next up for us, which is probably a good kind of way to wrap up this episode. Is Auburn's playing Missouri at 6:45 in Jordan-Hare, and another night game. Hopefully, they can keep the vibes, maybe coming back, maybe get them back. I mean, I feel like after this game, it's going to be tough. But also I've seen Auburn's fan base still kind of pretty regularly, even despite all of this last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of not playing super well, they still show up, and I still very much love to see that the stands are still getting filled up. I saw that Auburn opened up as a 2.5-point favorite. That swung to Missouri. Now Missouri's a 1.5 favorite, which I think is probably more realistic. But what's interesting, I was looking at Missouri, their schedule. They have not had an away game yet, away from Memorial Stadium in Missouri. So this will be their first true like away time, which I think is very interesting. I mean, Auburn's they use the word haunted. I feel like sometimes haunted towards Auburn, not with Auburn. And maybe we pull in some of those haunted vibes and maybe do some crazy stuff. Maybe win this game. That would be awesome.
Yeah,
obviously Vegas is thinking we have a chance.
It's a big stage for those guys in Missouri who, these rosters are new every year. A lot of these kids will not have seen half or most of the stadiums in the SEC, and that's a pretty tough place to come in and play. And the one thing you know as well as anyone that I think no matter what your football team is doing, people show up to support it. So it is an awesome atmosphere. Like I said, I've been to a game there. I look forward to getting back at some point. And I think no matter what happens, you're going to still continue to bring in top flight athletes. And, Auburn football always has a chance to get healthy and get healthy fast. That's, I think, the other thing that you have to keep in mind in this whole sort of new world order of how college football works. You can get healthy in a hurry. So I think there's still a lot to feel hopeful about if you're an Auburn football fan.
Well, I mean, you're still playing for bowl eligibility.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like if you play legitimately well for the rest of the season, I think you have a good chance at beating every single team still in the rest of your schedule. That is still out there for you. It's still hard, but I think if you get a couple of these games under your belt and you actually get a tight win, I feel like that gives the mojo back to the players, and they're going to feed off of that. And take that into the next game where it's a tight game, and maybe I don't think they're gonna overnight become the mentally tough team like a Georgia, but I think they have a shot at some of that where they can, hey, we've done it before, let's do it again. I mean, a lot of these guys, think about it, they put in the time and effort. Some of them have stuck around for 2, 3, 4, maybe even longer at Auburn years, and that could be, they're in it for the long haul, a lot of them. They're still obviously the ones that come in just for a year and leave, and that's fine. It's just the way college football is. But quick predictions. Any quick predictions on this Missouri game? For me, I'll kind of start it out. I think Auburn legitimately has a shot at winning. I think when I look at how the stadium is, will kind of dictate whether or not we win that game. And I know environment isn't everything, but if the vibes are still up and high, I think Auburn could feed off of that and maybe squeak out a 3-point win. I don't know, say like a 24-21 kind of game against Missouri. But if not, I think it could go south pretty quickly.
No, I'm going Auburn by 10.
Wow.
I think that defense is going to feed off of that first half performance, and I think just wreak some havoc and just make the Missouri guys uncomfortable. And I think, Missouri's been good and solid this year, but at least as I've sort of at a minimum tracked their box scores, people are they're putting up some points and gaining yardage. So I think that as a home game, and with kind of the circle the wagons backs against the wall, I like the Tigers by 10.
Wow, you are
the Auburn Tigers, I should say.
I think you've got some orange and blue sunglasses on, because you were seeing way more optimistic than I think a lot of people are, even as Auburn fans. But I think we're also coming down from, at least we're recording on a Monday night, so I feel like my emotions have simmered off for the Georgia game. If you had asked me my score prediction Saturday night or Sunday, I'd have been like, yeah, we're losing by 14. to Missouri.
Hey, all you do is watch the bad tape the first day, but there's a lot of good tape from the Georgia game to get guys motivated and believing in themselves, because that's an excellent football team, and to even completely shut them down for one half and march up and down the field. I mean, that tells you that Auburn has some juice, and they just need to channel it, and I think they do. I think they do that. I think they get healthy against Missouri.
Yeah, I think so. And in my opinion, also, if Auburn just plays even 3 quarters really well, I think you've got a legit chance at beating Missouri, because at this point, Missouri has played Central Arkansas, Kansas, the Louisiana Raging Cajun, South Carolina, who's kind of been high, and then they've also been really low, UMass, and then they played Bama last week. So Bama, there's going to be like this, I'm imagining kind of this emotional high from that game, and we'll see how they kind of respond. I mean, Auburn had obviously an emotional high against Georgia, so both teams will be kind of coming from we just lost against really tough opponents, and see how they do in this next week. So
yeah, I think if they settle down and eliminate the self-inflicted injuries, you can't have 11 penalties against anybody.
Oh no, definitely not.
So if they do that, and like you said, everybody does their job on every play, then look, you guys look good on paper against pretty much anybody.
Yeah, I think so. I think, again, on paper, you should have an opportunity to beat every team kind of going forward. I don't think anything's out of control that we can't beat them. All right. Well, I appreciate Mark. Thanks for hopping on and talking about the Auburn Tigers playing Georgia. And anything else to say?
Well, just thanks for the opportunity to ride shotgun again. And I always, love the chance to be at least a peripheral part of the Auburn football legacy. I think it's a great one. It's a great community of fans, and it's a great institution, and I know there's bright skies ahead. So thanks, and I look forward to coming back again.
Well, I appreciate it. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm on X at AJAY_. It's always great to be an Auburn Tiger and War Eagle.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by E2CNetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.